The fundamental issue here is that more than 80% of the total tax giveaways went to the wealthiest 1% and to America's biggest corporations. America's biggest corporations don't need the cash. They had $2.5 trillion of cash stashed away in their various treasuries. They didn't need the additional money. They're talking about some modest investments, $1 billion by AT&T. Well, I'll tell you what, AT&T can spend some money. They can spend some money in rural America where there is no internet broadband service. So there are things that can be done here. But the fundamental point is that the great majority of the money is going to the super wealthy, the 1%, of those who have estates that are multi-million-dollar estate, people like Donald Trump, who are going to enjoy a tremendous reduction in their taxes. Ultimately, the middle class and the poor are going to pay for this. This is an enormous giveaway of the national treasury to the super wealthy.
But if there are people getting more money in their paychecks come February, and that runs through into the midterm election, you know, the old adage, the people vote their wallets, are Democrats concerned?
I think there's a much bigger story here. Yes, there'll be a few dollars, but keep in mind that the same legislation that'll put a few extra dollars in their paycheck will rapidly take it away in their health insurance. The elimination of the mandatory purchase of insurance or pay a penalty is going to raise health insurance rates by at least 10%. It's estimated in the rural part of my district it may be a 25% increase. That will clearly, more than by many, many factors, outweigh whatever small benefit there is in reduced taxes. So the Republicans did two things here. Yes, they did give a small, modest tax break to the working men and women. Good. It should have been bigger. Secondly, they gave most of the money to the super wealthy. They robbed the Treasury, gave it to the super wealthy, to the corporations, and then they turn around and set up a system in which the Affordable Care Act is gutted. The inevitable result of that gutting is an increase of at least 10% across this nation in everybody's health insurance cost.
You bring up the Affordable Care Act. Let's take a listen to what the president said about the tax plan relative to the Affordable Care Act. Here it is.
We have, of course, the individual mandate, which is a very unfair and very unpopular provision, as you know, in Obamacare. Essentially, I think it ultimately leads to the end of Obamacare. It's essentially, I think Obamacare is over.
What's your realistic read here on the status of Obamacare? Is it essentially over, as the president just said?
Well, if it is, he's to blame, along with the congressional Republicans and the senators. Keep in mind that nearly 18 million people received insurance. 25 million people received either insurance or increased health care available through the Medicaid programs. And yes, indeed, the Republicans are gutting that program. The repeal of the mandate is but one part of it. They've done other things. The result of it is where they tried to, in one swell swoop, do away with Obamacare in the summer, and the public rebelled. The American public simply rebelled and said, no, you cannot take away our insurance. Instead, they came back in a nefarious, rather secretive way, under the cover of other legislation and with the power of the president to write regulations and to cut off funding. They are indeed gutting the Affordable Care Act. The inevitable result is twofold. Millions upon millions of Americans are going to lose their health insurance. They're going to be uninsured. They're going to get sick. They're going to wind up in the emergency rooms, and all of us are going to wind up paying higher premiums as a result of this game, this horrible game that's being played by the Republicans, often under the cover of other legislation.